The needle pierced Muhammad Ali's arm for the third time that morning, drawing blood that would change everything doctors thought they knew about the greatest boxer who ever lived. It was 1980, and Ali had just lost to Larry Holmes in a fight that should never have happened. What the blood revealed would shake the medical world to its core. The fluorescent lights of the Las Vegas medical facility buzzed overhead as Dr. Ferdy Pacheco stared at the test results in his hands. His face had gone pale. After 30 years of examining fighters, he had never seen anything like this. The numbers on the paper told a story that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If you're watching this and already feeling that chill down your spine, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Click that hype button because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see one of history's greatest athletes forever. This isn't just about boxing. This is about a man who unknowingly fought the most brutal opponent of his career every single day. The Caesar's Palace dressing room still reeked of liniment and defeat. Ali sat on the metal bench, his hands trembling slightly as he unwrapped the tape from his knuckles. The silence was deafening. For the first time in his career, he had been stopped, not knocked out, stopped. His corner had thrown in the towel after 10 rounds of watching their hero absorb punishment that would have hospitalized lesser men. "I felt like I was moving through water," Ali whispered to his trainer, Angelo Dundee. His voice, once thunderous enough to fill arenas, had become a rasp. "My legs! They wouldn't listen to me." Dundee's weathered hands shook as he helped Ali remove his gloves. In 40 years around fighters, he had developed an instinct for when something was wrong. This wasn't just fatigue. This wasn't the normal wear of a 38-year-old athlete. This was something else entirely. The room felt smaller with each passing minute. Ali's wife, Veronica, stood in the corner, her eyes red from crying. She had watched her husband take a beating that seemed to go on forever. Holmes, 28 and hungry, had landed punch after punch, while Ali's once lightning reflexes moved like they were trapped in molasses. "We need to get him checked out, Doctor," Pacheco said quietly to Dundee. "Something's not right." The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in that room knew Ali wasn't the same fighter who had danced around Sonny Liston or rope-a-doped George Foreman, but none of them could have imagined what was actually happening inside the brain of the man who had once proclaimed himself the greatest. 3 days later, in a sterile examination room that smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams, Ali underwent the most comprehensive medical evaluation of his life. Blood tests, neurological exams, reflex tests, everything that modern medicine could throw at a human body in 1980. Dr. Pacheco watched as Ali struggled with simple coordination tests. The man who had once moved like poetry was having trouble touching his nose with his finger while his eyes were closed. His speech, though still recognizable, had developed a subtle slur that hadn't been there 5 years earlier. "Muhammad," Dr. Pacheco said gently, "I want you to walk in a straight line for me." Ali stood up, his 6'3" frame still imposing despite everything. But as he took his first step, something was clearly wrong. His foot placement was uncertain, his balance slightly off. It was subtle, so subtle that most people wouldn't notice. But to a trained medical eye, it was screaming. The blood work came back first. Elevated levels of certain proteins that shouldn't have been there. Markers that indicated cellular damage in areas of the brain responsible for motor function. Dr. Pacheco stared at the results for a long time before picking up the phone. "We need to run more tests," he told Ali's management team, immediately. But Ali had already left Las Vegas. He was back in his training camp, convinced that what had happened against Holmes was just a bad night. He was already talking about his next fight, about proving the doubters wrong one more time. The blood results sat in a manila folder in Dr. Pacheco's office, a ticking time bomb of truth that no one was ready to face. The next few months passed in a blur of denial and determination. Ali announced he would fight Trevor Berbick in the Bahamas. The boxing world collectively held its breath. Those who loved him begged him to stop. Those who profited from him encouraged him to continue. In the gym, Ali's sparring sessions had become painful to watch. Young fighters who would have been terrified to share a ring with him just 5 years earlier were now landing shots with ease. His famous shuffle had become a labored walk. His jab, once sharp enough to cut glass, now moved through the air like he was underwater. Angelo Dundee pulled Dr. Pacheco aside after one particularly brutal sparring session. "Doc, you've got to tell me what those tests showed. I can't watch this anymore." Dr. Pacheco looked at the man who had been in Ali's corner for some of the greatest fights in boxing history. "Angelo, if I tell you what I think is happening, will you help me convince him to stop?" "What is it?" "I think Muhammad's brain is dying." The words hit Dundee like a physical blow. He had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified him. "How long?" Dundee asked. "I don't know. Maybe it started years ago. Maybe it's been happening slowly, so slowly that we all missed it. But those blood tests, they show cellular damage that's consistent with repeated trauma to the brain." The revelation hung between them like a death sentence. They both knew that Ali would never willingly stop fighting. Boxing wasn't just his profession. It was his identity, his purpose, his very soul. You're probably wondering how this is even possible, right? How could the greatest athlete in the world be slowly losing the very thing that made him great? Drop a shocked in the comments if this is blowing your mind as much as it did the doctors. The Berbick fight happened anyway. December 11th, 1981 in Nassau. Ali lost a unanimous decision in what would be his final professional fight. But by then, Dr. Pacheco had already resigned from Ali's team. He couldn't bear to watch anymore. "I quit," he told reporters. "I can't be part of what's happening to Muhammad." But the real story was just beginning. Over the next few years, Ali's condition became impossible to ignore. His speech grew more slurred, his movements became more labored. The man who had once floated like a butterfly was struggling to walk across a room without assistance. In 1984, Ali was admitted to Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center in New York. The tests were more advanced now, more precise. The technology had caught up to what Dr. Pacheco had suspected 4 years earlier. Dr. Stanley Farn, a neurologist at Columbia, conducted examination after examination. Brain scans, blood work, genetic testing, everything that medical science could offer. When the results came back, they confirmed what many had feared, but no one wanted to say out loud. "Mr. Ali," Dr. Farn said gently, "you have Parkinson's disease." The diagnosis hit like a heavyweight punch. Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder that affects movement, speech, and eventually everything that makes a person who they are. But this wasn't just any case of Parkinson's. This was something more complex, more devastating. "Is it from boxing?" Ali asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Farn paused. The honest answer was that they didn't know for certain. Parkinson's disease could strike anyone at any age for reasons that medical science still didn't fully understand. But the timing, the symptoms, the progression, it all pointed to something that the boxing world had been denying for decades. "It's possible," Dr. Farn said carefully. "Repeated head trauma can cause neurological damage that presents similarly to Parkinson's disease." "What, doctor?" Farn didn't say. What he couldn't say in 1984 was that Ali's case would become the foundation for understanding a condition that would revolutionize how we think about contact sports forever. Years later, as medical technology advanced, researchers would go back and study Ali's case with new tools and new understanding. What they found was shocking even to doctors who thought they had seen everything. Dr. Julian Bales, a neurosurgeon who would later become one of the world's leading experts on sports-related brain injuries, studied Ali's medical records extensively. Muhammad Ali's case was the canary in the coal mine, he would later say. He showed us what repeated head trauma could do to the human brain, but we weren't ready to listen. The blood tests from 1980 that Dr. Pacheco had ordered showed elevated levels of tau protein, a substance that accumulates in the brain when neurons are damaged or dying. In 1980, doctors didn't know what tau protein was or what it meant. Today, it's one of the primary markers for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. CTE is a progressive brain disease found in people with a history of repetitive brain trauma. It can only be definitively diagnosed after death through examination of brain tissue. But the symptoms, memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, aggression, depression, and eventually progressive dementia, match exactly what Ali experienced in his later years. If we had known then what we know now, Dr. Pacheco would later reflect, Muhammad Ali might never have stepped into a ring after 1975. But there's something even more remarkable about Ali's story. Despite everything that was happening to his brain, despite the progressive loss of his physical abilities, he never lost his spirit, he never lost his dignity, and he never lost his ability to inspire. The 1996 Olympics in Atlanta provided one of the most powerful moments in sports history. Ali, his hands shaking from Parkinson's, lit the Olympic torch in front of a global audience of billions. The man who had once proclaimed himself the greatest was now showing the world what true greatness looked like in the face of devastating illness. Muhammad taught us that greatness isn't about being perfect, said Dr. Abraham Lieberman, a Parkinson's specialist who treated Ali for many years. It's about how you handle imperfection. The research that began with Ali's case has now saved countless lives. Today we understand the dangers of repeated head trauma in ways that were unimaginable in 1980. Boxing has implemented new safety protocols, football has changed its rules, hockey has cracked down on fighting, all because of what we learned from studying the brain of a man who refused to stay down. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came in 2016, just months after Ali's death. Dr. McKee, a neuropathologist at Boston University, announced that they had found CTE in the brains of 99% of former NFL players they had studied. The condition that Ali had been living with for decades was far more common than anyone had imagined. Muhammad Ali was ahead of his time in so many ways, Dr. McKee said. Unfortunately, his brain disease was ahead of our understanding too. The irony is devastating. The man who was famous for his speed, his reflexes, his ability to avoid punches, had actually absorbed more head trauma than almost any athlete in history. Every fight, every sparring session, every training camp had been slowly damaging the very organ that made him who he was. But here's what the medical reports couldn't measure. Ali's impact on the world had nothing to do with his physical abilities. His greatest victories came outside the ring. His stand against the Vietnam War, his conversion to Islam, his role as a global ambassador for peace and understanding. The boxing made him famous, said his daughter Laila Ali, herself a champion boxer. But his character made him immortal. In his final years, Ali rarely spoke. The disease had robbed him of the voice that had once captivated the world. But when he did speak, his words carried even more weight than they had in his prime. "I'm not the same person I was when I was boxing," he said in one of his last interviews, "but I'm still me." Those words encapsulate something profound about the human spirit. Disease can take away our physical abilities. It can steal our speech, our movement, our memories. But it cannot touch the essence of who we are. The medical community continues to study Ali's case today. His brain, donated to science after his death, has provided invaluable insights into CTE and Parkinson's disease. Every discovery brings us closer to understanding these devastating conditions and, hopefully, preventing them in future generations. Dr. Bennett Omalu, the pathologist who first identified CTE in football players, credits Ali's case as foundational to his research. Muhammad Ali's courage in the ring was matched by his courage in allowing us to study his condition, Dr. Omalu said. He's still fighting, even after death, to protect other athletes. The numbers are staggering. Studies now show that boxers are at extremely high risk for CTE. Football players who play for more than 10 years have an 87% chance of developing the disease. Hockey players, soccer players who frequently head the ball, even some basketball players, all are at risk. But the story doesn't end with doom and gloom. The awareness that Ali's case helped create has led to revolutionary changes in how we approach contact sports. New helmet designs, better concussion protocols, rule changes that prioritize player safety. All of these innovations can be traced back to what we learned from studying the greatest boxer who ever lived. Youth sports organizations now teach proper tackling techniques that reduce head impact. Professional leagues have implemented baseline testing to identify brain injuries early. Equipment manufacturers are developing new technologies to absorb impact more effectively. Muhammad Ali's legacy isn't just about boxing, says Dr. Robert Stern, a neuropsychologist at Boston University. It's about making sports safer for everyone who comes after him. The man who once said, "I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," gave us something more valuable than entertainment. He gave us knowledge. He gave us awareness. He gave us the tools to protect future generations of athletes from the fate that befell him. As we reflect on Ali's incredible journey, from Olympic champion to heavyweight king to global icon to medical pioneer, we're reminded that true greatness often comes with a price. But it's also a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to light the way for others. Muhammad Ali fought his hardest fight not in any boxing ring, but in the examination rooms and research facilities where doctors worked to understand what was happening to his remarkable brain. And in the end, just like in his boxing career, he won. Not for himself, that battle was lost long before the final bell, but for every athlete who will compete in safer conditions because of what we learned from his sacrifice. What do you think about Ali's incredible courage, both in the ring and in allowing doctors to study his condition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you the way it moved me, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories that change the world. Muhammad Ali once said he was the greatest, and even in his final fight against an invisible opponent, he proved that he was right.